Hey everybody, I'm Matt Gross, aka the Rhode Island Rocky fan, and welcome to another episode of Purple Row Video. It's been a little while since we've done one of these, but today I want to talk about specifically about where this team is and why I think their record should be better than it is right now. And it's what I've seen from them so far has been both encouraging and monumentally frustrating at the same time. There's some graphs in this piece and just below. I'll explain those in a moment. But first I want to kind of back up and go back to, March, April, the beginning of the season, where people were trying to make projections of what this team was. I know a lot of projection systems had the team around 72, 73 wins. Some people had them just below 500. Keith Law had the just atrocious pick where he picked them to lose 109 games. But in any case, I didn't really have a prediction for them. I think my stance in the offseason was essentially that I had no idea what to expect from this team because there was a combination of so many players who had been good in the past but were returning from injury, like Yoli Shahzeen, Troy Tulowitzki, Jorge De La Rosa. You didn't really know what to expect. And they had a bunch of young guys just coming into the major leagues, which by nature are very, very hard to predict. So, I really had no idea what to expect. It was kind of a wait-and-see game. And I think what many, many people settled on and thought that, if the Rockies can just kind of stay in touch with 500, stay a little bit below that, show some improvement, then that would mark a good season. Because I think what they would have expected there is a team that kind of lacked some talent, but was doing things right fundamental, was scratching out some games, was moving in the right direction. Instead, what we've gotten that team that kind of stayed in touch with 500, now it's a bit below it. But they've done so in that incredibly frustrating yet somewhat encouraging fashion in the big picture. And what I mean by this is that the encouraging part is that I think on paper this team is actually a team that should be north of 500. I know some people may disagree with that statement, but if you look at them, they've got a very, very, very strong core in the top three pitchers between Shahzeen, De La Rosa, and Chatwood. We've documented this over the last few weeks, and the numbers they're putting up is unbelievable. As good of a top three that the Rockies have ever had. And then offensively, we all know that they have that core of Carlos Gonzalez, Troy Tulowitzki, Dexter Fowler, and Michael Cuddyer putting up extremely good offensive numbers. They have a good back end of the bullpen with the killer bees with brothers Betancourt and Belisle. Of course, maybe two of them because a lot of them have been on the disabled list much of the year. And right now, they have a defense that's as good as just about any defense that you're going to find in baseball. I'm not going to say it's the best, but it's right up there. The infield maybe is the best. If you put Arenado, Tulowitzki, LeMahieu, and Helton out there, I'll take that defense over just about any other in baseball. That is incredibly good. And even through this rough patch, the defense continues to be good, which may also be a good sign for some of these pitchers because you say, well, maybe they're overachieving. Maybe some of these guys, like Shahzeen and Chatwood may be overachieving. But if they're getting ground balls, this defense is not going to change anytime soon, at least not the Arenado, Tulowitzki, LeMahieu part of it. So what it really comes down to when you look at this team is a couple of problems. The first is that they have nothing outside of this core of players really helping them. They're getting a tremendous amount of negative production outside of this core of players, which is kind of sapping much of the production that they're getting from the core. And second, and I think this may be an even bigger problem for why this team is just so frustrating to watch, and really it should be fun after what we've seen, the end of 2011, 2012, is that this team, for whatever reason, does not get big hits. They underachieve production-wise from where they should be on a stat sheet offensively. And that's what the charts in this piece that I'm going to show you about. I'm going to use WPA, which stands for winning percentage added. If you don't know what that means, essentially, every single time somebody comes up to the plate in a game for any team, there's a certain chance the team has to win. Obviously, at the end of the game, it's 50-50. If the leadoff hitter hits a home run, then maybe that team's chances to win the game jump up to 65%. I don't know if that's the exact number, but that's just an example. So for that at bat, the batter would get a positive, 0.15 winning percentage. So if you hit a home run when your team's up by 10 runs, it's not going to matter. If you hit a home run down by 1 in the ninth, it's really, really important. So I think we've all seen this. The Rockies just simply don't get big hits. And if you go back throughout the season, how many games do you think that this team had really stolen? I mean, I know the big ones are probably a few against San Diego. San Diego they've done well against. They had, the game where they came back down from 3 runs on Sunday. Dexter Fowler hit the walk-off. They had one walk-off against the Dodgers at home, back in early June. They had one of the best wins of the year in Cincinnati, where Carlos Gonzalez and Troy Tulowitzki had a single and a home run, in the 8th inning of that game to take that one 5-4. But they're really, there's a few, every team's gonna have some. You've played 101 games. No matter how bad you are, how poor you execute in situations, everybody's gonna have a few good games. But what the Rockies simply lack, just completely lack in any way, shape, or form, is any sort of consistent, good fundamental baseball offensively. And it's really limited to the offense. Like I said, if they were a bad fundamental team all around, they would look awful in the field, which they don't. So it's really confined to the offense, which makes you wonder if they just haven't a click right, if this group of players just doesn't work well together, if it's the coaching, if it's, if they just haven't gelled. It's very, very hard to pin that down without being in the clubhouse. It's something we'll have to look at in the coming weeks here. But for whatever reason, they just seem to have horrible situational at bats. I don't know if that means the approach went bad. They don't use the opposite field enough. LeMahieu's used it very, very well recently. That'll be an example of a guy who's had success doing that. They don't hit behind the runners. The best example of that I can find is the 1-0 loss against the Dodgers before the All-Star break, where Chatwood pitched the complete game, only gave 1 run. Rockies had a man on second, nobody out in that game. Arenado was up. All he had to do was hit the ball to the right side, get the man to third base. You got a speedy Josh Rutledge would be at third base with less than 2 outs to tie the game. Didn't get that. And that's just one example, but you see these things over and over again. You've seen situations where they can score early and then they just go into hibernation for 4 or 5 innings. That was a big theme with this team in May, why they didn't score many runs. You see failure to drive up pitch counts, and just a general sense of making life very, very easy for the opposing pitcher when they need to get out. Way, way, way too easy. Almost to the point where you don't even get excited when the team gets people on base, because you just feel like there's this impending sense of doom looming over the team because they're not going to get it done. And this is where WPA, as I mentioned a little while ago, having these charts, comes into play. So first of all, the first chart you're going to look at is just the 18 position players. I threw out the pitchers. The 18 position players who have had at least 10 plate appearances this year, and what their WPA is. Only 4 of them, have a positive number. And they're pretty much the guys who have to have positive numbers. Tulowitzki, Cuddyer, Dexter Fowler, and Carlos Gonzalez. And even Carlos Gonzalez is only about a half a win above 0. For WPA, which is really not good considering the type of production he's put up. Dexter Fowler is really the only one who's got a really good WPA for what his overall numbers are. Maybe Yorvik Toriablo, although he's still negative, he's just not a very big offensive force at the plate. The other 14 guys, Todd Helton is well and going there. He's another who's gotten a lot out of his WPA for what his overall offensive line is. But the bottom line is the other 14 guys are all negative. And 6 of the 14 are more than a win negative in WPA. So this is just an extreme anchor on the team's chances of winning games when you have this many guys maybe performing horrible offensively, maybe only performing a little bit below average, but simply not getting productive hits or putting together productive at-bats when the team needs it. The second chart on here, and this is the one that I find particularly damning, is the OPS of all 5 teams in this division and the WPA of all 5 teams in this division. And as you'll notice, because the Rockies play at Coors Field, they have the highest OPS of anybody in the division. So therefore, they should have, naturally, if you have the highest OPS, at least a WPA in touch with the other teams. It really probably should be a little bit better than the other teams, but we'll say in touch. And would you believe they are negative 10 wins in WPA? That is just astonishingly horrendous when you consider what this team is offensively on paper, skill-wise, the OPS, the on-base percentage, the slugging percentage, whatever, and where they are in terms of actually getting meaningful hits. This is incredibly damning on their part as a collective group to be negative 10. The Dodgers, who have a slightly lower OPS, but in the same general area, are positive 2.59. Everybody else, the next lowest team is the Diamondbacks at just, then they're less than 3. So the other guys are pretty tightly bunched in this division, and then the Rockies are way back at negative 10. And if you look at the difference between the Dodgers and the Rockies right now, it's simply, it's almost 13 games. It's 12.69 games in WPA between these two teams just from simply when they get hit. And that's really what it mostly comes down to. If you look at these two teams, because it's not really that much, the talent gap is different. If you look at overall what their numbers are overall offensively, you go to hitter by hitter. It's simply that the Dodgers have gotten many more hits when it matters than the Rockies have. And that's what it simply comes down to. And then the other thing, the final chart that I wanted to show you, just to show you how bad this is historically from a Rockies standpoint, is I just took the team WPA of every team in Rockies history. And this 2013 team, already, we're only 101 games in the season. Remember, this is cumulative. So this is something that the longer you go, the more games you accumulate, the more likely this is to go in one direction or another. The Rockies have only played 101 of the 162 games, and yet they're already the worst team in franchise history for WPA. Worse than the expansion team in 1993, worse than the 2005 team, one of the worst of all time, and even worse than last year's team, which the problem was pitching, but hey, it's still worse anyway. And the other thing to notice about this chart is if you look at the bottom 5 teams, it's very concerning to me, because you got the 93 expansion team there. Okay, they should be there, expansion team. You got the 2005 team. That was the worst year in Rockies history, probably before 2012. But then you look at the other 3 of the 5 bottom teams. They're all the Reese team, 2011, 2012, 2013. And the 2013 team is particularly damning because they still have 61 games to go. So they're actually on pace to end up at negative 16 for the season, WPA-wise, which would just be an atrocity beyond belief, particularly when you consider the good players this team has offensively. So that's what it comes down to. We simply just need better fundamental baseball on their part. Because even if the Rockies, let's say, had a WPA of -4, which still wouldn't be that good, it would still be the worst in the division, despite having the highest OPS in the division, they would be 16. They would be in the lead right now. They're 5 games back. So if they had a negative WPA of 4 instead of 10, they would in all likelihood be a game up. That's the difference. It's simply not getting productive hits. So, going into the season, kind of circling back around, many of the projections for this team were below average. They've actually shown me that they're probably an above 500 team. At least they should be on paper. That's the problem. They're more compelling on paper than they are on the field. They've gotten great comeback seasons from Troy Tulowitzki, from Yoeli Chacin, from Jorge De La Rosa from injury. Even Carlos Gonzalez bouncing back after not showing much power last year. They've gotten a career year from Michael Kadire. They've gotten a breakout season from Tyler Chatwood. They've filled a couple holes defensively anyway at second and third base with DJ LeMahieu and Nolan Arenado. But they simply have not found a way to parlay their offensive numbers, which I mean, in middle of the road, you can say what you want, into anything other than a complete mess when it comes to true production and actually getting hits when they matter. And that is why this team is so depressing to watch. When they should be, that may be a little strong, but they should be more exciting to watch. A team that is in contention and plays at Coors Field and is having some success, has a few star players, like Carlos Gonzalez and Troy Tulowitzki, this team does, has a couple of good young stories. This team should be more exciting to watch. And yet, it's been an exercise in futility for the last month. Now, it will get better as far as how bad they've been offensively during the month of July, because this is just everybody's hit slumps at the same time. But what we really need is better situational at bat. Something to get this WPA number under control, and then they'll start winning more games, because right now, they're getting unbelievably good pitching. As Andrew Fisher pointed out on Twitter the other day, the Rockies have had 13 consecutive games now where the starting pitchers allowed 3 runs or less. So they're getting the starting pitching that they would have killed for at every other point in franchise history, but they're just having horrible at-bats. And those at-bats are specifically coming in points where they need to have good at-bats. make a pitcher work for. So for the rest of the year, all I really want to see is an improvement fundamentally in hitting. That to me is the biggest thing I want to see, because look at this lineup. It's going to pretty much be the same group of guys going into next year. So in some ways that's good, because I feel like they can be pretty productive. This is the encouraging part. I feel good about this team on paper. There's not really much that I would do to it to make it better without, the ridiculous scenarios where you can sort of pick off the other people's all-stars, which you obviously can't do. But they simply just need to do a better job of coming together as a group. I do find the last 3 years, 2011, 2012, 2013, all being in the bottom of the WPH are concerning, though, because something is missing there. The at-bats need to get better. So we'll see what happens as the season goes on. But this to me really drives home the frustrating aspect of this team, and I'm just hoping to see an improvement in this department as we go into the final couple of months of the season, so that we can build towards 2014 and beyond. And if we get lucky and they make a run at 2013 for this division title, wonderful.